Joining me live now is the Deputy Liberal Leader and Shadow Minister for Industrial Relations, Productivity and Employment, Jane Hume. Congratulations and thank you for joining us once again. I thought what stood out in that piece there in Farah was the woman who said about Pauline Hanson, she said the same thing since she left a fish and chip shop. Why has the Liberal Party squandered the natural advantage it has there in Farah? And what would you say to people thinking about voting One Nation in Farah today? Why should they vote for you, Jane?
Laura, we know that the Farah by-election is going to be a difficult one. It's always difficult when a popular local member is leaving after such a long period of time too. In fact, that last election that Susan Lee won, or the first election that Susan Lee won about 25 years ago, was off, theoretically, it was off the National Party. That was a three-cornered contest where the seat moved from the Nationals to the Liberals. This was always going to be a difficult seat. And let's face it, Australians, wherever they are, and Farah is included, are feeling aggrieved at the moment. They're very disappointed in the Albanese Labor government. They're seeing their standard of living go backwards by about 10% just in the last 4 years alone, and they're looking for solutions. They're looking for answers. If you are aggrieved, you tend to look to a grievance party, and that's exactly what Pauline Hanson's One Nation is. It doesn't have the solutions to get the country out of the slump that it is in. It certainly isn't a party for mainstream Australians, and that's exactly what the Liberal Party and the Coalition will be offering. Genuine and credible solutions for ordinary Australians so that they can see better days ahead.
You say One Nation is a grievance party without the solutions, but with respect, the Liberal Party hasn't offered any solutions yet either. So will you have some concrete policy ahead of the Farah by-election?
I think one of the great frustrations that led to the tumult in the Coalition and the Liberal Party last week was exactly that. Yes, absolutely, we'll be taking a suite of policies to the next election that reflect the hopes and the dreams and the aspirations of ordinary Australians. Our first and foremost commitment is to protect Australians' way of life and to restore their standard of living. Angus Taylor has repeatedly said that should be our primary focus, our relentless objective. That's exactly what we'll be taking to the next election, with a suite of policies where people can see what they want reflected in what it is that the Liberal Party offers.
I think a lot of people would be thinking the next election, surely we should have, more time to get a good look at the alternative that you are offering. Have you not had time? Are there no big ideas within the Liberal Party and the Coalition at the moment of how to turn this around?
There certainly are some big ideas and a very talented front bench lineup to deliver that now. We haven't actually had our first Shadow Cabinet meeting yet, Laura, so but that will be very soon indeed. I think you'll be hearing an awful lot more from very talented people like Tim Wilson as Treasurer, for instance, like Sarah Henderson as the Shadow Communications Minister, John O'Daniam as the Home Affairs and Immigration Shadow Minister, James Patterson as the new Shadow Defence Minister. This is an extraordinary group of talented individuals that are willing to take the fight up every day to Labor, hold them to account, but also present that credible alternative. I'm really looking forward to working with them.
OK, fair enough. You haven't even had your first Shadow Cabinet meeting yet, so we'll give you a little bit more time there, Jane. I want to ask you about a few things that are on the radar now that you really need to be asked about, and that is, first of all, the ISIS brides. There are 34 Australians trying to make their way home. The government says that they will face the full force of the law if that is required. But I want to ask you about the children, because there's a lot of commentary saying, these people decided to go there, they knew what they were doing, they're living or wanted to live with a regime that was hostile to Australian values. But children were born into this. What do you do with them?
It's a very good question, Laura, and a vexed one indeed. I mean, a government's first responsibility is to protect its citizens and to ensure that our borders are strong and secure. We need to make sure that we are safe on our own shores and that we're not inviting people to Australia that seek to do us harm. Angus Taylor has been very clear on this issue. My colleague James Patterson has said today that we would like the government to use its temporary exclusion order powers in order to keep Australians safe and to keep these ISIS brides in Syria where they are. Because let's face it, these people have actively chosen to associate themselves with a caliphate that does not. These are not people that abide by our core values. They don't agree with democracy or the rule of law. They don't agree with freedom of speech or freedom of religion. And in many cases, they have demonstrated that they seek to do us harm. There has always been an opposition from the coalition to Labor's self-managed return policy for ISIS brides. That simply isn't good enough. There hasn't been security checks on 3 of these women for the last 3 years. That's a genuine concern. We have no intention of separating parents and children, but if there are people that want to come to the country that seek to do us harm, we should say the door is shut. Now, the Albanese government has said over and over that they are monitoring the situation, that they are not assisting in any way. Well, they have the powers to deal with this, and now the situation is becoming urgent. They should use those temporary exclusion order powers immediately to ensure that Australians are safe.
For how long and why? You say at least 3 of these women pose a threat. What's the nature of the threat? Do we know?
Well, at least until our security agencies have done proper assessments as to whether it's appropriate to bring them home. And I don't think that should feel uncomfortable or unusual. Australians rightly deserve to be kept safe within their own country. If people have chosen to go overseas to associate themselves with a caliphate that not only does not abide by our core values of the rule of law and democracy and freedom of choice and freedom of speech, but have actually actively chosen to do us harm, to deny everything that we hold dear and bring violence and hatred to our shores. Well, I think we should have the right to demand that our security agencies take over this process rather than simply having these carefully worded assurances from the government that they are monitoring the situation.
So just to be clear, exclusion order until security agencies are able to properly assess these women and children, and then they can come home, in your view? Well, of course, it entirely depends on the security agency's assessment, but we want to make sure that they have full access and that it's a transparent process too. At this stage, the government is sort of hedging its bets. It's using weasel words, but this is profoundly important. If people seek to do us harm, the door should be shut. We do not want to invite people to this country that seek to undermine our way of life, bring old hatreds onto our shores and do us harm. The door should be shut. OK, I want to ask you about health insurance premiums as well, because I remember a time where the health minister used to stand up, face the press gallery and explain why it was approving such a thing. Yesterday we saw the biggest increase in 8 years to health insurance premiums, up 4.4%. This is going to affect 15 million Australians. And I'm not sure we've heard from the Health Minister, Mark Butler, on this yet. At least he hasn't faced questions on it. How is it justified, Jane?
Well, that's a very good question. We know that there has been increased pressure on health costs, as there have been on all sorts of costs right across the country, because inflation remains out of control. The inflation dragon has not yet been tamed, no matter what Jim Chalmers says. A 4.5% increase in health insurance premiums is eye-watering. And, of course, that has a knock-on effect. If people can't afford their private health insurance premiums, well, they give up private health insurance. And that means that there's more pressure on our public hospital system. We can't afford to have further pressure on a hospital system that is already overcrowded, that already has ambulance banking, that already has wait list problems. That's not good enough. So we want to make sure that health insurance stays affordable. You can see why this release has happened under cover of darkness rather than with the Associated Press conference. But Australians are paying more for a trip to the GP now than they ever have before. It's around $50 out of pocket to go and see a GP on average. So when Labor say that they've brought down the cost of healthcare, you only have to look at the facts or indeed turn up to your doctor to find out that simply isn't true.
Jane, just quickly, we're about to take our viewers live to Jacinta Allen, who's responding to questions about calls for a royal commission. She's trying to turn this around, saying, the Liberals never back workers, and that, I think she's... I don't know what the justification is, but apparently no royal commission. Just quickly, your views on that?
No, there is no justification for that. The idea that $15 billion of taxpayer money has gone straight into the pockets of organised crime and criminal gangs under Jacinta Allen's nose, with essentially her endorsement, and that the Albanese government has doctored the report that demonstrated the link between organised crime, the CFMEU, and the Allen Labor government. This is one of the biggest scandals in political history, and Jacinta Allen has nowhere to hide. A Royal Commission is the only solution here in Victoria to get to the bottom of the links between the CFMEU, the Allen Labor government, and indeed the Albanese Labor government.
Well, that would even take too long in my view. But Jane, thank you for your time. We'll speak to you again soon.